like full circle.
It's full circle, but it's also, I mean, I would have thought I was the girl that would leave.
Yeah.
And I've lived in the same house for 20 years in Oviedo.
Really?
Yes, I haven't even moved.
Was that the one that we went and played
Yes.
pool with?
Yes.
Me and Pat Garrett?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have been there for 20 years. So yes, I'm ready for a change.
Okay. Wow.
But
yeah, you know, that's funny. I don't know. I had always imagined like you were, I don't know, not there.
I travel and I do things, but I mean, 15 years of my life was very seriously being mom.
Right.
Yeah, first and foremost. So this is.
So yeah, that's interesting too because. I don't know, I took a very circuitous route to parenthood, you know, and I did all this other stuff. And finally, like, my wife and I were in the car, and she's like, I think it's time we really try for a kid. And I was like, are you sure we're ready? And she's like, let's do some math. How old do you want to be when you're chasing kids around? And I'm like, well, that's true. I'm already like 35, you know. I got married when I was 30. We had a good run for 5 years before it all tanks. No, it's fine. But like, yeah, I don't know. So I have friends that have like kids in college, like you, and I'm so far removed from that. I feel like, holy shit, these guys are only. Sorry, I just swear. These guys are only 5 and 8. You know?
Yeah.
5 and 8.
5 and 8's a good age, though.
It's starting to be really fun.
It's a fun age. Yeah. All right, so let's segue to the circus, and just so you know, voice has to go that direction. So don't turn this direction to laugh, right? And then you must deal with us on stage. Like, I cannot be doing this. This is exactly stage handling, isn't it?
Well, no. So I do need a little direction. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
Right. Okay. So I love the metaphor of the circus.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Okay.
And then I love the part about when you make policies when there's errors, because you must deal in errors all the time.
Well, with that, we're at a strange crossroads because we want to push the envelope, which means get a little dangerous.
Right, so let's talk about that a little bit. So those two. And then I would say third, this could be anything, like Las Vegas, anything. This is a different culture, so there's something about the energy in this space that is seen as an anomaly in the country, and that might be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. Did I give you direction?
Yeah. All right.
I mean, and just you want to be loud and direct it like this.
Direct it like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
all right.
You got it?
I think so. My voice usually carries. That's all right. Circus as a metaphor for life. I mean, it was really interesting because when I was at the crossroads of college graduation, I'd already dabbled in the circus a little bit through Florida State University, and I moved out to Reno, and I met this guy. He changed my life, Tony Steele. He's a flying trapeze artist, and he had all kinds of weird wisdoms and things that he would impart to us. But like one of them was just like, if you want to do this, all you got to do is just decide to do it. And we talk about like the power of like that decision making often, but like he had all these kernels of wisdom, and he is not a formally educated person. He's a very intelligent person, but not formally educated.
Sure.
And like years later, as I read through articles on decision making or on other things that, you know, coaching and high performance people, there will be kernels of this guy's wisdom sprinkled throughout all of this stuff. I mean, even when we talk about learning styles and, you know, interleaving skill development.
There is no learning style.
Well, okay. Yeah.
No.
No? That's all false.
It's all false.
So you're not a kinesthetic learner. You're not auditory. It's just
That's
yes.
Completely. It's one of the biggest debunked positions. Yeah, no, it's
I've been living a lie.
No, and so we've had a lot of problems in the military because it's an artifact, right? People still believe it. It has what we call face validity. Face validity is when it seems like it's true, and therefore you believe in it, but in fact,
because
it's not.
I feel like I'm a kinesthetic learner.
Yeah, and that's why
I learn by doing stuff.
Yeah, but the reality is that most people would learn by doing much better anyway. It's just people like to be doing something, and so it's essentially been conflated, right? It's I prefer to do this, therefore I've decided I learn better doing that way. But in fact, everyone would learn better doing that way. They just don't always choose it, and the school system isn't always set up for it. So then you start to unintentionally attach that capability. So more times than not, we should all learn by doing. The listening and the visual should be paired, and there's an actual term for that. And it has to do with the type of information you're getting, not the type of person that you are. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Well, Tony Steele, I'm sorry.
But there's so many others. Yes,
no.
All the other epiphanies are good.
Well, no, he actually. So I guess I'm pulling this out of some textbook that I read who knows how long ago. But like in skill development too, like there's the block skill development. If you do something like 10 times in a row, or you want to interleave it, like you're doing something for a little bit and you put that down, you do something else, and then you come back, and that skill is more ingrained.
Yeah.
He had me doing that stuff years and years and years ago, like as a practical, just as a practitioner of moving and doing stuff. And I thought it was really interesting when you read this theory later on, and you go, oh, well, of course that makes sense, because we've been doing that already. Like, we'd be on the flying trapeze, and we just, remember I told you, we come out sometimes and we swing for 2 hours.
Right.
Just working on our swing. But then we'd also do that with throwing tricks to the net. So if we were throwing tricks to the net, we were throwing like layouts and layouts and layouts, and something's going wrong, and you find yourself in a trend, he would say, okay, stop. Instead of doing a back layout, you're going to do forward overs, and do forward, and do this, and put a twist there, and totally mix things up. And then later on go, okay, let's try that layout again. And then it would work.
Do you know why?
Please educate me.
So I had this teacher once that I worked with out in Germany, and he was really upset that he had to keep doing all of this teacher training, continuing education as they call it. And I said, well, of course, it's probably going to bother you, because honestly, you're a natural teacher. If every teacher taught like you, we wouldn't have to do trainings. You've intuited what works, and you're very observant in your students. And so you come in with enthusiasm, and you get them out of their seats, and you naturally make these changes. I said, how many of your other teachers do the same thing? And he goes, oh, yeah, no. I said, okay, so there are experts by birth and experts by training. And the person you worked with understood it all and intuited it. Somebody like me knows how to say why that works.
Yeah.
And so the reason it works is because it has to do with the brain being able to reset and calm down. It's a cognitive load problem.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the science reason, but you're exactly right. I mean, these kinds of people exist everywhere, and we don't give them credit. Because we say, unless you've learned it formally, you must not actually know it. That's hogwash.
Well, and yes, and there's another thing that's interesting too about coaching beyond your skill level. Because I don't do triple somersaults anymore,
right.
or maybe let's talk about something different. That I was never really a Russian swing flyer.
Right. Okay.
Right? But I can coach Russian swing.
Right.
But there exists this mythos of well, if you never did it, you can't coach it. But But I find that's on a spectrum because, yes, if you know a base set of knowledge, you can extrapolate that knowledge into coaching beyond your level. But then there are people that just don't know what they're doing and can never know what they're doing.
Yes.
So
And
explain that.
well, there's also people who are experts at doing and can't teach.
Oh, yeah, that happens all the time.
That happens all the time. We have a huge problem in the military. I always refer to it as Tank 101. I'm like, just because you know Tank 101 doesn't mean you can teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, right? There are facilitators who can maneuver information across a group of people who are experts and move them forward, whether it's physical decisions, capabilities, or action.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I find some of the more talented people physically, it's probably so intuitive for them. They haven't had to think about it, and therefore they don't know how to convey that in words.
So what we say in the literature is that they don't go from A, B, C, D, E, F, right? They just take A and leap to Z, and they've learned to just gloss over, which makes them better, faster, and reactive, and all these things. But also means it's really hard for them to teach. So you always want somebody who actually is more like tier 4 out of 5, because that person is knowledgeable enough, but is also aware enough of all the steps that they're doing. It's an interesting combo.
It is, because oftentimes in Cirque du Soleil, it used to be a different set. They'd say, "Oh, that guy is the best artist in that group. We'll make him the artist coach." And that didn't always work out, right? Because sometimes they're super talented, and there's nothing that takes them away. Well, there's two other things too. We also hire them to be a good artist. We don't hire them to be a good coach, but sometimes we hire them to be a good artist, and then out of that we try to pick. We think that guy would be a good artist coach, and oftentimes the guy is, he does the best tricks and he does everything. He knows everything about that act. Maybe he's going to be the best artist coach. It's not always the case because it's hard for them to convey that information.
Right.
It's very natural for them.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So what have you learned being in the circus?
Oh, man. I've learned limitations.
Like today. Perhaps I have learned limitations in the circus today.
That's it. I've learned my limitations for sure. And where you can push things to.
Yeah.
You have your automatic guards that are like, I don't think I can do that, but really you can go a lot further.
Yeah. So you're saying I could have caught and flipped today, huh?
Yes, you could have.
Yeah.
And you will next time you come out to do a flying trapeze.
Oh gosh, so you'll let me come out and do this again, huh?
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to invest in the hand things. How much do those suckers cost?
Listen, you don't need them.
I'm telling you, right here needs them. What do they cost?
I don't know, maybe $30.
30. That's worth my comfort.
Yeah. I never used them because my old school guy said, "You don't need them. You're just going to get in the way." And honestly, too, I didn't fly at the volume of the tricks that they're doing and these guys that do use them all the time. So I didn't use them. However, I would use them if I ripped, because I would rip and still swing on my hands afterwards. And so then you would use them after a rip. And I used a different kind. Actually, so old school. This is so old school. We had candle wick, or not really candle wick, lamp wick. And it was in those kerosene lanterns,
Yeah.
So it comes in strips like that, and then you sew a loop in the ends of them, and you put them over your fingers, and it would just come right here and just cover enough of your.
Really?
Yeah, and then you take those wrist tapes, and you just tape it to your wrist like that, and swing on that sucker.
Huh.
And that was like 99 cents. But nowadays they have the gymnasts. There's a lot of crossover from sport into circus, and they borrow from each other really. Mostly nowadays, there's so much development in equipment and accessories to things. So they'll have dowel grips, which is what you probably saw today. And and that's a leather piece that goes around the wrist, comes up, goes over the fingers, and then there's a little wooden dowel in there. Sometimes some of them have them, but some of them don't. But I don't. So I didn't get a chance to really look. But the dowel like gives an extra grip, and you can like really torque that bar, and it'll send you.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Sense.
it's not just protection of the hands; it's actually help.
Okay.
But it's a double-edged sword too, because grips can break on you in mid-swing, and it can be really clunky to catch.
I'm probably safe that I'm not going to do anything too pronounced. I know you're waiting for me to be 65 and swinging, but
in that regard, I would then recommend not taking the dowels and just getting the flat leather.
Yeah, think of the flat. It sounded like a good plan. Oh
yeah,
my God.
But yeah, I used to catch. There was a guy that had a giant wrist.
Right.
And it was so hard because I got kind of small hands. Could have been a world champion. I got small hands, but like, so yeah, you had to really like, gripping this way and then or really holding on to that, and there's a difference.
Yeah, I believe
and it can make a big difference to someone else when you're, 35 feet up.
Yeah, that becomes very important. Mm-hmm. So let's have policies.
All right.
I know you talk a lot about how you guys have to make policies.
Yeah.
We do that in the government.
Mm-hmm.
How's the government and the circus the same?
Well, I think we spoke about it earlier too, but I find it's a tendency of not just of institutions, because I've been part of universities and everything else too, where someone screws up, and then thus the birth of the policy, right? And it's like it all comes down to training people in decision making. So they treat the effect but not the cause, and that's where people get into real trouble. And so I hope I've had some influence on that if a policy does come by us to put some input in to say, are we really treating the root cause of these issues? Because if not, we're just slapping a Band-Aid on it, and someone's going to find another way to screw up.
Yep.
Right? So instead of telling people what not to do, which is also a coaching tenet, like you shouldn't go around saying, hey, don't bend your arms on the trapeze. You should say, keep your arms straight.
Yep.
Because if you hear, don't bend your arms, you're thinking, I'm not going to bend my arms. I better not bend my arms. I'm not bending my arms. Instead of, I'm just going to keep my arms straight. I mean, it's an oversimplification of it, but in the same sense, like we should tell people what to do in policies and not what not to do. I know that's a double negative, but so often I find that's what we're doing. We write a policy or institute some sort of rule to prevent people from screwing up, as opposed to saying, this is what we want out of you guys and this is what we expect out of you guys. And then it's open-ended. And then you can have better results later, maybe results that were even beyond your intentions in a positive manner, as opposed to people just thinking that they're locked in.
Right. We have a book called The FAR in government. It stands for Federal Acquisition Regulations. It's about this thick. It has razor-thin paper, and it has teeny tiny writing all the way through it. And it is the rules to ensure that government funding is provided to contractors fairly. And the only thing that book does is guarantee that it will never be awarded fairly. and it's for two reasons. Underlying all of it at the root cause is, number one, the only people that could actually apply for funding and follow all these rules either have someone on staff that they can afford to pay to know them all, or they themselves are wily enough that they enjoy the game of trying to work around the rules.
Right.
And so with the same people applying every single time. In fact, we met with somebody today, and what was I saying? You have to be in the club. You have to know how all these rules work, because in defense, they're so substantial. You'll never make it if you're just going to apply for money and think, oh, I'll have a great idea. Someone's going to want it. No, there is much, much, much more involved, and it's a different system. And yes, we make decisions based on fear in the government.
Yeah.
And what happens in the circus when you make those kinds of decisions?
Well, you don't progress for sure. You're not going to get long-term benefits. Like, you know,
Right.
some people, and actually really high achievers I found, just interviewing the people that I work with, they were creating Olympians and, you know, the highest high level in their art form. Sometimes they're that successful because they're afraid to fail, so they just succeed until the next level.
Right.
Succeed until the next level, to succeed until the next level, because they don't want to fail. And there's a real profound lack of enjoyment and a lack of intrinsic value after a while, and they go, this sucks, and they just burn out, you know. And then there's other people that want to achieve and want to strive more.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can do this. I wonder if I can do one little more of this. What if I happen to? And those people, I find, they're the ones that sustain a career over years and years, and they're always sort of reinventing themselves. You know, because like in the circus too, you can't do the same thing all the time. Well, you can do the same thing all the time, but you will eventually wear out, you know. But people that look like they're doing the same thing all the time, like say in flying trapeze, but they may alter their tricks, they may alter how they do things, and they keep it just enough, modifying that they're still marketable, yet they're not totally winding themselves, you know, grinding themselves into nubs.
Yeah.
You know. So and they seem to have a real love and a zest for it, which keeps them innovative and keeps them pushing. You know. And then the people that fear that failure, but succeed despite that fear of failure, they finally, I feel, run into a failure. And then that's it, you know, or that's really tough for them to handle, or they go way back, or, you know, or there's an anxiety about that persists for years and just eats away. I was talking to some trampolinists one time. He's like, well, I said, well, how'd you get, you know, so far? Well, I didn't want my dad to get mad at me, you know, and then I didn't want my coach to get mad at me, and then I didn't got this other, you know, and so I did what he did what he did because he was afraid that screwing up would get people mad at him, and then they're like, wow, you did that so great, now go to the next level and do more, and that just piled on the mental pressure for this guy for years, and you were talking over 10 years of doing this stuff, you know, and then we did finally get to the performance thing. That's a hard habit to shake. The thing about the difference, we take a lot of athletes and we turn them into artists, right? There aren't really any rules to what we do. If you want to do a double tuck, there's not a judge sitting in the audience going, I thought he pulled that a little too soon, or, you know, whatever. There really is just, you know, how did that, instead of that feat becoming an expression of athleticism, it's an expression of creativity, right? And that changes the game a little bit. It also changes the mindset, because a lot of athletes feel like, especially when they first get in, they got to go, improve, and they'll burn themselves out. Especially at Circle, we do 500 shows a year, right? So we have to sort of back them off a little bit and say, hey, listen, no big deal. We got a show again tomorrow. Of course, we always want to have them perform at their best, but we also have to think, listen, we want you here for 500 shows. We want you here to make sure that you can last. You know, so like, if you don't like kind of ebb and flow and manage your workload, you're not going to last long.
Right.
And then from a dollars and cents kind of thing too, it's an investment. If you're the artist, we want to invest in you. You're our investment. We want a return on investment, which is good performance for as long as time. You want to invest in yourself because your return is a nice paycheck for a long time and a hopefully fun and fulfilling career that keeps you going, right? And there's a lot of intricacies there, and I guess how that all relates back to policy is how we shape and govern ourselves to produce the best results for both the artist and the organization. And I don't feel that always happens because someone is reactionary and they go, don't do that, nope, don't do that, and then we're not going to do that, as opposed to saying, this is where we need to go, this is how we should get there. And we need a little breathing room, especially we're not talking about, we're in the circus, we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with creative arts. So we have to allow that to percolate and flow and move and do things, because too much structure is just no good. It's confining.
Yeah, so we have the same exact scenario in government. We don't have artists, but we have creative problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing. If you always create a policy that gives people a limit, we have two types of people. We have your type A, go, 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 go. I saw over and over and over again. They kick out, and then they end up on panels, and then they talk about how you can't ever change government because it is so stuck. And then you get people who say, I still have value, I can just add here or edit there, and they do. They change their roles. But in both cases, you end up with what you said, which is there's no progress, right? There's essentially treading water or getting out of the pool, right? There is no forward movement, and it was interesting to see it across the departments. It's also interesting to see that it's different in different departments. So in defense, when I would talk to the legal team, the Office of General Counsel, they would say, all right, ma'am, what is it you're trying to do? Well, I'm trying to help the warfighter in the following way, but there's this rule, and I need to make sure I don't violate that rule. And so then they would look at the law and they would say, well, we can interpret the law this way, which allows you to do the good work for the warfighter. And you would go to the Office of Personnel Management and they would say, you want to do what? Well, we're not sure if the law applies, but there is a potential that it might possibly, if you close one eye, twirl in a circle, and maybe somebody has a camera, and also there's a full moon. Given those possibilities all happening at once, gosh, it seems like you probably shouldn't do this. And you're like, what? Are you out of your mind? Did you just say what I thought you just said? And the message is keep your head down, don't invent, don't think outside the box. You have a task, complete the task. And what's interesting about when you ask people to complete a task, I had a paper once that I was trying to, this was when I was at the university. And so it's this...
Go ahead.
Oh, wait.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
My friend. Gotta take some stuff. It says thanks. I was making sure.
Well, yes, you have to watch. So I'm at the university, and I have this experience where I am working on this 30-page paper. And so I want to get it published. It's already 30 pages, but the theory isn't quite right, the assessment isn't clear, the data still needs some work, blah, 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 blah. And someone who, now we had a supervisor, it's very strange, I'm a supervisor at the university, but anyway, we now have the supervisor, and she says, it's 30 pages, you need to send it in. I said, but it's not going to get accepted. She says, your task was to write a 30-page paper, send it in. I said, it's not a report. It's a creative document that is supposed to press the science. She could not understand. So how this comes back to government is when you give somebody a task that says complete a paper, they give you a paper. The quality could be anywhere from here to here, which means it's useful or it's totally not useful, but you check the box.
Yes.
So I have to assume you have this in the circus too, where it's like, do a routine. Okay, well, we do a routine, but it doesn't sell if it's not creative, interesting, dynamic, inspiring, passionate. But measuring that becomes really difficult.
Well, it is, and it's very subjective.
Yes.
And I find a strength to a lot of our shows really is the diversity, because there's a little bit for everybody.
Yeah.
In most of the shows that we do, So like somebody might go in and go, oh great, alright, but then they see a trapeze set and they go, oh my god, that's so cool, or whatever it is, and so it's really interesting to walk out with the audience, because I like to watch the shows.
Yeah.
When we watch the show tonight, what we should do is get up and we walk out with the audience and listen to what they say.
Can you imagine if we did this in government?
It would be pretty crazy, yeah. But it's the best litmus test. And I used to do this even when I worked at Illinois State University or Florida State University. get up, you watch the show,
Yeah.
and you leave, and then it's good and bad because you hear, man, that was so cool. Can you imagine doing that? Oh my God, blah, blah. Or sometimes you hear, I didn't get that. Or that was, I mean, what is the music is like? What, that was more of when I was at Ohio State, but like you'll hear something, oh, geez, that is okay. I'll have to look at that, or hey, we're doing a great job, or and it's such an interesting thing too when a husband is walking next to a wife and. They like both different things, and they'll argue the other one's not as good as their favorite, but it's fun. So it's an interesting thing to walk out and like that. Oh, okay, this is reading, that's not reading.
Yeah.
Or I've heard this like 4 times now, maybe we should take a look at it, or put a second set of eyes on it, or I'll bring it to an artistic director and I'm like, hey, you know what do you think about this? And then, all right, so yeah, that's interesting, but we do get like the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law is how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly what ends up happening.
And so people say, oh, it says, yeah, well, how do we make this apply to our situation? Because sometimes too, it's a policy or it's a guideline or whatever. We have 21 different shows. We have artists from, I don't know, maybe 30 different nationalities, different disciplines, and even within the discipline, there's different types of those disciplines. So, if it comes to physical testing or if it comes to what, something that we need, like I've run afoul of a couple people that they go, doesn't make any sense. We tweak one of these things so that we can actually get something out of it, but that's not what it says here or what it says there, all right, but it's a little bit better now. There was a time when I think also too, really, Circus doesn't have, it's not known for policies. The circus in general, especially the traditional circus, is not known for.
Yeah, but like you said, it's a really interesting space to understand why this doesn't work. I mean, can you imagine if we expected our government workers to be creative problem solvers who watch the rollout of their programs and then listen to people, metaphorically, leave the building as they learned about them and heard what they said and edited accordingly? How different do you think the country would be?
Oh, huge. I mean, yeah, of course, we'd have a lot less problems.
A lot fewer problems, yeah.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think that happened. That would be awesome if that really did happen in government. I mean,
wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
And do you know how easy it would be, actually? There's actually mechanisms set up to be able to do it, just nobody uses them because they're afraid. Because once you take the time to listen to that, then you have to do something about it. And they're running so fast to every task and fire. So I have a metaphor I use all the time. I said, if you run in, you're a single person, you're putting out little fires. Eventually, you become overrun by all these little fires. So you hire a team. But eventually that team also becomes overrun. So then you start coming up with new ideas on how to put out fires. Now you use blankets and you use chemicals and you do all these things. But eventually you still get overrun by fires because what you were supposed to do is stop, step back, hire a marketing team who builds a bear called Smokey and teaches everybody not to start the darn fires in the first place.
Yeah.
But that stepping back, instead of being reactive, being proactive, is actually really hard because you have to walk away from the fire to do it.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now,
right?
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about Eisenhower's decision matrix. You know what I'm talking about? The urgency.
Okay, left
now.
field.
but it is left field. But it's so funny because I feel a lot of people are challenged, myself included, with assessing the situation correctly in the first place. And so they miscategorize what needs to be addressed now, what can wait for later, what is nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And thus they act according to their miscalculation, and then it starts a path of its own. And then 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 years down the road, it is way off the mark, right? And so, like, I don't know, I use that decision matrix because it's simple, and I can apply it to a lot of things, and I try and teach it to other people to apply it because I go, is this a right now urgent concern, or is this one that needs to be addressed, but we can take some time to think about it, or is this total BS that we should just discard? Like let's take a step of that, and then okay, because like I mean, a lot of times too, like even in just giving feedback, someone sees something going on, oh my god, and they'll jump on another artist or and then that sets off a whole chain of usually negative events that can spiral into emotional outbursts and emotionally charged situations. And
we have no emotionally charged situations in Delaware.
I'm sure not.
Never.
Why not? No way. No way. We're not like some of those other governments.
Yeah.
They're just duking it out in Parliament or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if we didn't have Twitter, I don't know what we would do.
Right. But that's the thing. And you got so well. Let's talk about your response here. Is it fit? And can we let that person cool off? Or let's all look at this later. And then okay. All right, I see that. But
So what's your number one lesson learned?
Number one lesson?
Tie a bow around it all. What's your number one lesson?
From the circus?
Yeah.
I don't know. The number one lesson is tough to categorize. Number one lesson. My number one lesson learned.
You can give me two if you can't decide.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my number one lesson is like people aren't machines.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I guess I would quantify it maybe as situational awareness. There's not a formula for everything. There's so many different ways to do everything, and you have to kind of be aware of the situation and then kind of react accordingly. Because you get into this, especially in coaching, especially with the circus, and you deal with like Russians that want to. This is how you throw a backflip. And then your Chinese, no, this is how you throw a backflip. And then an American guy, I never learned it that way, or my coach was Russian, but what you need to do is figure out, well, we need to throw a backflip, right? We want to see how this works, and then I'm not, especially when I get people like this, I just learned there's different ways for everything, and these are people and they're not machines, and they're just gonna have to deal with that. And it's nice in the sense that circus, like I said, there's not judges. And I'm not going to, a lot of times you get people that are in 20 years in gymnastics.
Right.
I am not untraining what they learn to teach them a different way of doing stuff. So I got to see what they can do and apply it here. And maybe we can tweak it here and there, but, it's not, we're not going to undo something. So I never really go like, I try to avoid. That's not how you do it, or I wouldn't do that. It would be, okay, I see where you're coming from. Maybe we can tweak it. Maybe we can do that. That was a Tony Steele lesson, actually.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
They're all different. Everyone's different. There's a base formula for doing some stuff, but there's nothing so formulaic that it can be applied to person to person. It's just impossible.
Well, that's pretty much what we try to do across the country and everything. So maybe we should learn your lesson. People are not machines.
People are not machines.